All right. Hello and welcome to the Indie Spotlight. Tonight we have a special guest, good friend of mine, Susan Kehl. Hello, Susan. Susan is from Attica, New York, and she's an indie filmmaker. Recently graduated Fredonia,
Yeah.
and some of her most recent work include Circadia, Sound or Sunday Morning, One More Book, and her most recent piece, Bound by Spring, which I actually got to see in the cinema alternatives showing, which was great. I loved it. One of my favorite pieces. I mean, that was a great
Thank you.
um, just little uh, screening that you guys did, and it was great seeing everyone's work. I
Yeah.
mean, that was the big thing, seeing
Yeah.
your. I mean, for us, unfortunately with COVID, we had to do it online, but I still feel it's held together the
Yeah.
same kind of power that seeing it in person would be. But how you been?
I've been good. It's been a bit weird, post grad. I didn't really know what to expect, especially with COVID. So I haven't been as active filmmaking wise as I would have liked to be, but I'm still trying to do stuff here and there. So just getting used to the new normal, I guess.
Yeah, no, for sure. I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, what is it, like 4 months now we're doing this, and
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when they were telling us it was 2 weeks, so
I know. I know. I feel like it could have been two
could have
weeks.
been maybe, I don't know. We I don't know.
Maybe if everybody wore their masks, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's all good.
But yeah, no, unfortunately, there's been a lot of productions that have just been shut down.
Yeah, I know.
And it stinks. I mean, as indie filmmakers, we could still, we're used to doing a lot of running, gunning, and doing a lot of. I know this, just
Hmm.
doing a lot of it on your own. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, most of my productions I've done everything on. I haven't even had an actor, like a lot of my pieces don't include actors, so I am able to shoot and edit and do everything by myself. So that's kind of nice that I know how to do that. So I can still do stuff like that. But
now when you're working on these kind of things, having to do everything, does it kind of get you into almost like a control kind of like you need to know that things are being recorded? Like, if say you introduce someone else to help you out, like, do you find it harder to like kind of give them
yeah, actually on
trust?
so yeah, that Bound by Spring was my capstone, and I did want like a crew and actors and stuff, and I hadn't really worked as a director by my not by myself. But I hadn't really worked with like a crew as the director before. So that was a big learning curve for me. So I did feel that I wanted that sense of control over everything. But at the end of the day, you kind of just got to delegate to other people, especially when it is a production of that size. It wasn't a big production by any means, but um, I did find that I had to step back and let people do what they needed to do so that I could get other stuff done. Otherwise, nothing would have gotten done. So, um, a big part that I did want to make sure was getting done correctly was the cinematography, because that is
That's it. That's the bread and
like
butter.
doing. So, I had two assistant cinematographers, Matthew Hens and Hunter Barden, and they were great about working with me because I'd always be hovering over them on the camera and be like, "How does this look?" Like,
I mean, that's how it is, like,
yeah,
especially working in this kind of experimental realm. It's one of the things you got to like. I mean, I remember working on some projects together when we had to do like some team projects. It was always a little scary, just letting someone in. I think that's what it is really, because
yeah, right. It's
I
like,
would I would say there's like a lot of passion in your pieces too. There's a lot of, it's like, it's art. It's art. It's
right.
hard to let
Yeah,
people in and kind of help you translate what you're trying to say.
yeah. I know. Sometimes I don't even feel like I understand myself.
But that's the thing, I feel like whenever I'm brainstorming or whatever, I have like an idea, or like if there's like something I want to talk about, I'm just like,
Hmm.
I don't even know how I'm going to do this.
Yeah, exactly.
and you shoot some stuff. I mean, that's how I find it. You know, I just go out. I like to just shoot some stuff, and I'm like, I let that kind of inspire me
Yeah.
to.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
that's just how it. Sometimes it is. You go out there and you just start shooting stuff, and you get ideas from. I mean, that's why I always tell a lot of indie filmmakers, you know,
Yeah.
especially people either graduating or in school, you know, learning. Just take your camera. You got a camera. Just go shoot stuff, even if
Yep.
you don't use it. I mean, I know it's something that Phil used to talk to us about. Phil Hastings, our professor from Fredonia. We
Mhm.
both went to the same school and took a lot of the same classes.
Yeah. Yep.
Again, I had the pleasure to watch a lot of your pieces, and I was, you know, it's just nice seeing, you know, it's just awesome seeing people's growth. I mean, there's so many other students that, you know, I started the class out with, and we were like near the end of my senior year, seeing their like senior capstones or just pieces they were doing like 2 years from when we started. It's just crazy
Yeah.
the growth
Yeah.
artists make, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely feel like I grew a lot in my 4 years there. Like I didn't ever think I would do a narrative piece for my capstone. You know, I thought maybe I would just do another completely experimental piece, but I was experimental.
I
So
It was awesome.
yeah.
Like I was
Thank
blown away with
you.
that one. That was like you could see all the hard work that you've done over the years like compiled into one thing, and I was like, wow. I was blown away. I was a little jealous because I was like, wow, this is your senior caps. I was like, wow.
I know, yeah, and like I really I give a lot of um not credit to I'm really thankful to Phil because he let me work for 2 semesters on that instead of just doing 1 semester. He let me do that for 2 semesters. So I think that's why I was able to flesh it out as much as it was.
Oh, yeah, and what I've also learned is just like, you know, the longer you kind of take, it stinks. The longer you take, though, it helps develop the developing process. You
Yeah.
know, you get to think things a little more through. You can shoot and try. That's why I always tell people don't rush into projects or like just because you finish I think that was one thing Phil. I'm understanding now that Phil told us, and it was just shoot stuff. Like, you know, like I was saying, just shoot stuff, or like, you know, the project's done, but you can keep going. And I was like, come
Yeah.
on, man, I finished. This is done.
Yeah,
But
like
now I understand. I'm watching my old stuff, and I'm like, I could have done all like it just makes sense. You're like you're always gonna learn something new. You're ever growing, and you're just like, wow, I could have done this a lot differently.
right. Yeah, I must have done like 20 different rough cuts. Like, and they're all just a little bit different. Like I would send it to him and he'd be like, you got to tweak this and this and this. I'm like, I did this last
That's
time.
filmmaking. I mean, I know, right? It's filmmaking. I feel like
Yeah.
you'll have the final project. I always see this picture floating around online. It's like a picture. It's like, oh, this is the final dot, like
Yeah.
MOV. Seriously, this is the final. I mean, there's so many times I've written final. I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
this is the second final too. You know, it's like
Yeah. And then you end up
it's
capitalizing
never finished.
everything. Yep. Yeah.
Going into that, so like, what got you into filmmaking? Like, what was like, what's the start of your
So
passion?
when I was in ninth grade, I took a career aptitude test that told me I would be a good cinematographer. And I was like, I like being creative. I like doing stuff like that. And I didn't know anything about filmmaking, and I never did any filmmaking in high school. And I didn't even have a camera in high school. So when I went to college, I literally knew nothing. And I'm surprised I even still wanted to go to college for film, not knowing anything. But I came in and Phil took me under his wing right away and was like, oh, you know, or you don't know anything. I'm going to mold you into like the kind of filmmaker that I
Yeah.
want to be. Which like, yeah. So I'm really glad I stuck with it because I've ended up loving it and knowing that that's what I want to do. So
Yeah, and it's also good to have that some sort of mentor, you know, even if like regardless of like your professor stuff, but like Phil was there to actually like, you know, take you on. I realized you know, that was the one thing I loved about his classes. He was always like, you know, when he saw people who were like really trying to push themselves, he would, you know, really he would help them out and give them good feedback and like
yeah.
really push them to be the best filmmaker they could be. And I really did appreciate that, you know, doing that in class.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I really appreciate the fact that he spent as much time with me as he did because I don't think I would be where I am without him. So yeah.
Yeah, that's
Shout
another thing. I feel like people, I was gonna say shout out to Phil,
out.
but it's like another thing I want to talk about with you. I feel like the whole like filmmaking, a lot of people think, oh, the director, they were just one day they're like, I'm going to be a director. And they kind of are just like, I'm a director or like a filmmaker, they started picking it up and doing it, but there's a lot of work that
Yeah.
goes into it. And
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of it isn't seen as work, but it is, like
Hmm.
whether like you're sitting out there for days just shooting stuff
Right.
and then
Yeah.
bringing it back and editing it, and especially when you're the one man band doing it all and you're just like
Yeah.
checking
Yeah. Like,
locations out.
yeah. Yeah. Like at most, I think we had 6 people on crew at one point. Like, and that was like the most we had. Like, that's a small crew, but
That's a small crew. I was
we,
gonna say,
we
what was this your big with Bound by Spring? Was that one of
yeah,
your
with
bigger
Bound.
project? Was
Yeah.
that your biggest
Yeah,
crew?
that was my biggest crew that I ever managed. So, like, and usually we would just have like the 2 assistant cinematographers, and like one of them would be doing a sound or gaffing or something like that.
Yeah, everyone was doing something. It's just
Yeah, like, like I would just have usually like 2 or 3 people, but at most we'd have 6 people, and like, yeah, but 2 or 3 people, like, we were able to manage because I had planned so meticulously beforehand, so we were able to get it done with the people that we had. So that was good. So planning is definitely huge.
yeah. And it just goes to show like it doesn't matter what kind of crew you have, you can still pull. I mean, you can pull off some pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah, yeah. With the right, like, I mean, they were so good about like just working. They knew what they needed to do, and they had never. I don't think they had ever worked on like an actual set before.
Oh
So
yeah.
like I was very proud of them. They did a great job.
Yeah,
So
it's good. I mean, that's a hard thing to come by, especially in the indie kind of circuit. It's either like low pay or like no pay, like I got you pizza, I mean,
I know.
especially
Yeah,
in college. I mean, the one thing with college though, it's like, oh, I mean, there's so many projects. I mean, people get it. It's a lot of like that's why you need to find people who are passionate about it.
yeah.
And I mean,
Yep.
that's what Peter and Des and I did. It was the 3 of us. We're like, all right, we're all here to make some movies, so let's just keep making them. Like I'm not
Yep.
doing anything today.
Right.
But that's a big thing. It's like it's hard, especially when you're on the independent kind of spectrum of things. Especially if you don't have the funds. You
Yeah.
got to figure out how if you're not if you got a crowd fund, you got to think about, all right, now you got to come up with different tiers and stuff because they get people to come. Spreading out. Just
Yep.
getting money, saving money. I know a lot of people who I'm friends with. They save up money and they shoot a movie. I mean, and it's like hard because everyone's like, oh, how much is it to make a movie? Well, it's like you can make a movie off of $0, but you could also
Yeah.
make,
I had no budget.
I
No
mean, there's a lot of
budget.
people I've seen, it's really the equipment. I mean, when it comes down to it, it's the equipment. And even in
Mhm.
that, it's like, as long as you know what you're doing and you're able to make something, I mean, that's why I love film. It's like,
Yeah.
really the only person stopping you from making it is yourself. You
Yeah.
just
Exactly. Yeah.
go out. You really just got to go out there and start shooting.
Hmm.
And it's really just, you got to figure out what you want to shoot. And even sometimes if you don't, you just got to plan it out. But what's
Yeah.
your like brainstorming like process? What's like, what goes into the creative process when you think of ideas?
So I had that. Um, so let's like use Bound by Spring for an example. So that was the one that I put the most thought into. Like before, when I was doing those other projects, I literally would go out and shoot, and then editing was where the process came together. And I'd be like, okay, this is what I'm doing. When I figure out my editing process, I'm like, oh, I'm going to do something like this. And usually it would be fulfilling project requirements. So,
Yeah.
but I'd usually come up with my idea in the editing process, which isn't always the best way to do things. So when I was doing Bound by Spring, I was like, okay, I really got to like sit down and write out a bunch of stuff. So I started writing the script, and the original script had dialogue in it. And then obviously the end result did not have dialogue. So I went through like 3 different versions of a script before I finally settled on the one that didn't have dialogue. So it was just an action script. And I knew that it had to be like the way that I wanted it to be. And I didn't want to compromise at all. And I wanted it to be what I had in my head. And it had to be like
It had to be it,
so,
it's your baby,
yeah.
It's hard, the biggest thing I think is taking criticism, especially in a class kind of at like setting when you're the professor's like, all right, what are your thoughts, guys? And you're like, I don't want to hear one thing from any of you, but it's like you got to hear it, because a lot of people see things you don't see, because you're staring at the screen, especially when you're man banding it. You're the only one staring at it. I mean, I've been there sitting in the lab just like editing on my computer, and I'm just like, please, someone else watch this. I need to know what they think.
So then I ended up on that action script, and then I was like, all right, now I need actors. So then I posted on the Buffalo Niagara film page, and I was like, hey, I need actors for no pay. So
with those kind of, not to stop your thought, but with those kind of forum, I guess, what was a Facebook page you said?
Yeah.
Are there a lot of people on there that like are willing to do this kind of work?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I got a lot of responses. I actually, so the female character, I actually got her from the dance program at Fredonia. So she auditioned, and that was great. And Phil had suggested that I get a dancer for that role because dancers know how to express with their bodies. And Tina did, because she couldn't talk because there's no dialogue. So she had to express with her body. And I think she did a great job doing that with her expressions and everything. But then the older man character, I posted on the Buffalo page, the Syracuse page, and maybe the Binghamton page, I can't remember. But I had several men reach out to me and be like, hey, I'm interested in auditioning. And they drove all the way to Fredonia. And
I was going to say, you shot that in Fredonia, right?
Yeah, they sat in the studio with me, and they went through the actions that I had given them, because again, how do you audition with no dialogue?
Like, I know. I mean, you also got to see if you like you see what you see on screen.
Yeah. So that was mostly like camera tests with them, and I'd be like, okay, show me what you would look like after your daughter did something you didn't like, so okay, they have this facial expression, like,
it's crazy. So you're telling me people from Syracuse came all the way from Fredonia? How far is that? Like,
not Syracuse. I think I don't think anybody from the Syracuse page got back to me, but the Buffalo page definitely. And the farthest that someone drove in was from Medina, and that's like an hour and a half away from.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, even though, that's crazy that there are people like that interested, like,
like
excited enough to come out to you.
Yeah, there were 2 guys I know of that they came out and they're like, yeah, I'm retired and I'm not doing anything, and I would love to be a part of this film.
Oh, yeah, that's crazy.
So it was good that I needed that age bracket, I guess, because I got a lot of retired men.
Well, that's the thing, especially when you're at school. It's like, how many times you're gonna see like these older, I hate to say it, but like these older characters that you write played by like a 18-year-old kid. It's like, dude, this is this kid's dad. They're like the same age.
Yeah, I knew I could not have that. It would not have the same.
And it's little things like that really like add to a film, like between amateur, I feel, and just like professionalism. I mean, it's just, it's simple things like that.
Right. Yeah. And I even like, some people didn't even think his name is Mick, the actor. Some people didn't even think he was old enough to be her father.
Her dad? What? I'm not saying anything. I mean, I didn't. That didn't bother me. I mean, he's like, oh yeah, this is her dad.
He does look young, but he's not that young. Like he's not as young.
Yeah, he's like a dad. He's a dad.
So I had to explain to a couple people, like, yeah, he's her dad.
Oh yeah, no, that's her dad. What do you mean? Like, how do you like? No, it's her brother.
Yeah. So maybe if I did have a budget, I would have gone out and found somebody that looked a little older, I guess. I don't know. But
Buy some age, age him up.
I thought he did a great job, but yeah. So, yeah.
So what kind of what was your process on that? Like, what was your like putting that to get that idea together?
So the idea for that, I actually
And for that, we're talking about her of course, her piece,
Bound by
Bound by Spring. It's basically all we've been talking about because it's one of my favorite, and I was really trying not to do this, but I want to know. I want to
It's the
know.
one I put the most work into. So, yeah. So it's gonna sound cliche, experimental film. I had a dream like a while ago that I had a dream that my father and I owned a brewery in the industrial era. I have no idea where it came from, but I got a lot of great imagery from that, and I wrote it down. I made sure to write it down. And then when I was thinking about ideas for my capstone, I was like, oh, I remember that dream I had that I think I could do a lot with. So it was going to be a brewery at first, and I was looking at there's a abandoned brewery in Buffalo that I was looking at, and I kept trying to contact the owner, and he just wasn't getting back to me. So it finally came to like late August, and I'm like, I gotta start shooting. Like, so I was talking with Phil, and he was like, well, doesn't your family make maple syrup? And I'm like, yeah. So we have
Make
that.
some syrup.
We have that shanty in the woods, and I was like, that would be great to film at because there's electricity there. We could plug in the lights, and we could keep the fire going. It wouldn't be too cold. And then that cave that you see in the film, that is a cave on a farm in Sheldon, New York, on Perry Farms. So that was going to be my secondary brewery shooting location because that cave was used as a brewery during Prohibition.
Now, when it comes to making like your different films, what do you think some of the struggles you face when you come to make them?
So yeah, a lot of those earlier films that are on my YouTube, a lot of those were restricted by project guidelines. So I hadn't really made a lot of stuff just for myself, like in college, because I was working on projects. So, so that was a big struggle. I feel like I wasn't able to be not as creative, but I think those projects were important in developing a foundation for the filmmaker I am now, because I had to take so many different pathways to get to a final result with those projects, that now I feel like I have a wider scope of how to do things. So when it came to my capstone, I was like, I can do whatever I want. It's awesome.
It's a little freeing.
It's also terrifying because I don't have any kind of guidelines. All I knew was I wanted it to be at least like 10, 15 minutes, and it ended up being 20 minutes. And I wanted to show off my abilities that I've come through college with. So I think it did that, so that was good. But yeah. So yeah, but a lot of the struggles I faced were the like we talked about, the control thing. So I didn't have complete control over it. I had control over a lot of it, but not over all of it. Especially when it came to the music. I don't know if you saw in the credits, there's 3 composers that I listed because they were gonna work. I had 3 student composers that were gonna work on a score for me and then record it, and they weren't able to record it before coronavirus hit. So they all had to go home, and they wrote the score, and I would love to have them record it when they can, if they can. But
so what you're telling me is like the music that you have in there now isn't the final music, or?
Well, I mean, It is, but I would also like to maybe do a different version with their music because they worked so hard on making that score that I feel bad to just let it go to waste. So the music that is in there is a guitarist from the UK that Phil knew. So
again, it's all about connections.
I know.
Thank you, Phil.
I owe a lot of things to Phil.
I mean,
yeah, so he was great and he worked with me a lot, and guitar wasn't really what I had envisioned. I wanted like violin and cello and stuff like that, but
now when it comes to things like that, when you see like you said, some projects you don't know what you're doing. It's like the real creation comes during the editing process. When things aren't really going your way and you're just like, I don't know how I can get through this or make this into a product. What are some things you do to like get yourself through that?
So yeah, when I was sitting alone editing, I would get very frustrated because it wouldn't be like what I thought it should be. And I'm like, well, I need this, and this shot, and I don't have it. And, you know, I would just have to step back and do something else, you know, like just step away from it and do something else. Think about it, take a shower or something, come back to it, and with like fresh eyes, you know, that's a big thing. That's something I learned freshman year taking the drawing class. Like, okay, sometimes you gotta step back and actually
walk
look
away,
at it and
maybe
make
a few days, you know.
Yeah, like so it wasn't like I was working on it every day because I would have burned myself out really quick. So
I mean, there are some days I was working on projects in school and it was just like, I can't look at this, like I need to leave and like not come back to it for literally a day, and like I just would come back and be still mad at myself and not know what to do.
And I did get very frustrated. Like when my first rough cut, I hated it. I was like, this is not what I wanted at all. And
that's a good thing. Yeah. That's a good thing though. I know, I hear a lot of people saying, you know, if you hate your first rough cut, that's good. You know, I mean, you got progress coming.
So I must have done like 20 after that, like just little tweaks here and there, but still like 20 versions by the end of it. And I really did have to literally step away. And it did take like feedback from, I was in like, I was the only capstone student, but we had like the independent study students looking at my capstone as well as I was going along, and their feedback was invaluable. And so I really needed feedback from people to tell me I wasn't crazy and that it was going somewhere. And like
it is good hearing people being like, oh, I see, like there's nothing better than someone saying, oh, I see what you did there, and you're like, you did, thank you.
Like I was so afraid people weren't going to understand what was going on because there's no dialogue. And like the different things that people have told me like they thought it was about, like that is really cool to see as well. Like, you know, like most people get the basic story down and then they're like, oh well, I thought about this when I was watching this part, and I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Like
now kind of jumping off of that with being in like the experimental realm, how do you feel when people don't, like you make something and people might not see what you were trying to say? Like what are some things, like how does that make you feel?
Like that was something I struggled with, like freshman and sophomore year. I'd make something and then show my parents and they wouldn't get it. You know, they're like, oh,
what is this?
So
you did what?
Yeah,
this is what you're doing at school? All right, I mean, hey,
this is what
you're happy. You got A's.
So you know, so it does, like I don't like explaining a lot because I do like when people put their own interpretations on stuff. But so it is kind of frustrating, but that is partially why I wanted to do a narrative, because I knew people would understand that better than if I just did a collection of images. Like
and there's definitely, I mean, as much as I love experimental film, sometimes it is hard trying to express a message. I mean,
Yeah.
there have been multiple films I've been told, you know, by the director or like the filmmaker, the message, and I was on, you know, feedback. I don't see that message, and that's like another thing I feel like a lot of filmmakers need to be open to. You know, sometimes you might think, you know, it's speaking something, but it might not. You know, it's hard.
Yeah.
You know, art is a hard. You know, it's not meant to be perfectly translated. But
Right.
you know, my whole thing is I just love when people feel something from something I make. You know,
Yeah.
and definitely one of my biggest struggles is trying to get the message across, and also leaving it open for interpretation, because I feel like that's just like a big part of art. You know,
Hmm.
the ambiguity of things. You know, not too not too um like out there, but like enough where it keeps people thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a huge part of why art is so important, is because people can put their own interpretations on it. And that is when art is the best, you know, is when it has many interpretations, to me anyways. And I think that's a huge part of getting ideas out there and letting everyone see, so that they can put their own interpretations on it.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah. Especially with filmmaking. I mean, it's such a amazing medium to work in,
mhm.
especially when it comes to these more experimental. I wouldn't say they're more focused on art, because I mean, film is art. I believe,
Yeah.
like, you know, narrative is great, but there's definitely something about experimental films where it's not just blatant, you know, dialogue coverage. You know, there's some artsy thinking behind it, you know, creative breakdowns, and you know what, let's be creative with it.
Mhm.
And there's nothing more powerful than that, than I think, than have like seeing an artful, or like I don't know, artful, I don't know what's the word to use, but I guess a creative filmmaker, or just like the artistic creative process of, you know, that going into it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
If that any of that actually made sense, I don't know.
No, yeah, yeah.
Well, Susan, it was a pleasure having you on today.
Yes, thank you
It
for
was great
having me.
talking about all your endeavors and experiences.
Yes.
You got any final words you want to share with everybody?
Um, keep being creative even when you feel like you can't.
Yes.
But
And
you got
always, you got to do it though. You got to
yeah.
break through it.
Yep.
And where can we find some of your work? You mentioned YouTube. You got your YouTube channel, which I'll link.
Yeah, that's about it, because I
Don't
don't pay for Vimeo, so
don't go on Vimeo. Yeah, that's like a whole nother topic.
yeah.
Video versus YouTube. I mean,
Yep.
it's like, if you're not on Vimeo, you're not legit, you know. But
I know.
YouTube, it's a whole nother thing.
Eventually I'll pay for Vimeo, but
Yeah,
for
I
now
mean,
everything's on YouTube. So
everything's on YouTube. Check it
yeah.
out. I'll have that below. Definitely check out Bound by Spring, her newest and most recent piece. Blew me away.
Thank
She also
you.
got a bunch of other stuff on there. Check that out. Um, and we'll see you next time on the Indie Spotlight. See you guys. All right, that was great. That was great.
Thank you.
That was
Yeah, that
awesome.
felt really good.
Yeah.